Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. My name is Brandon Drum. I'm here with Parker Thune, and today is a very good day in the world of Oklahoma Sooner football, particularly recruiting, as none other than four-star Miami Central defensive tackle Floyd Boucard has announced his commitment to the University of Oklahoma. Big get for Oklahoma. We're going to talk about that right here on this podcast. We're going to talk about SEC media polls. Parker and I put in our picks. We will discuss our top 16 in the SEC and why we chose the rankings that we chose. And we will discuss the three Oklahoma Sooners that made the first, second, third team All-SEC teams, with Billy Bowman and Danny Stutzman being first team All-SEC, which is a big accomplishment, being their first time ever in the SEC, even though it's preseason. And then none other than newcomer transfer wide receiver Deion Burks making third team All-SEC for the University of Oklahoma. We're going to discuss all that right here on this podcast. Parker, do we have bills to pay? Yes, no, maybe?
We do, but that'll come later. I pre-recorded the ad read today.
Thank you. You
don't have to sit here and giggle. Well, you wouldn't have to giggle anyway, because it's not a Manscaped read or not a Chubby's read. Nothing risque.
Well, that sucks. Those are always fun. All right. We will talk about Floyd Boucard then.
Let's do it.
Huge get for the University of Oklahoma, Parker. A guy that is just skyrocketing in the rankings for us at Rivals. Went to the Under Armour camp down there in Miami, won the MVP. The guy is phenomenal. He's a phenomenal athlete. He is a guy that has not even tapped into what he is to become at that position. Oklahoma beat out the likes of Alabama, Penn State, Miami, USC. And you start throwing those names around in the world of college football, and you're like, damn. Like that's the type of player that Todd Bates is getting now at the defensive line and defensive tackle spots. Again, the defensive tackle spot continues to grow. He's joining Trent Wilson, right? Going to be he's one of the better defensive tackles in the 2025 class as well. We saw him at the Rivals 5-star camp. And I mean, Kamari Moore, the 3-star defensive tackle that's been committed forever. So you got three solid players. Kamari Moore, decent senior year, could also pull in that 4-star as well. So, I mean, this is the type of recruiting that Oklahoma fans have salivated for at the defensive tackle spot. But you've talked to Boucard more than anybody else. So talk about what they're getting as a person, what they're getting as the player that you know, that you've been around.
I have my phone here and I'm scrolling through. The very first time I posted an interview with Floyd Boucard on OUinsider.com was on Leap Day, February 29th, 2024. At that time,
right?
At that time, Oklahoma was easily the biggest offer for Floyd Boucard. The other schools that he cited as primary interests besides OU at that time were Syracuse and Boston College. Reading through that thread is hilarious because obviously no one had proper perspective on Floyd Boucard as a football player, because the reality of fandom, the reality of message boards in general, Brandon, is that it's a forum for people to just spout off uninformed tanks. And I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, because there are a lot of people who make it a point to stay informed and do their homework and make sure that anything that they're putting out there in the realm of opinion is a rational one. But there were so many folks saying, Syracuse, Boston, why is this the type of kid? 5.6, mid 3-star. Why is this the type of kid Todd Bates in Oklahoma want? And yet here we are nearly 5 months later. And the schools that Oklahoma had to beat out for Floyd Boucard included, but were not limited to, Oregon, Georgia, Alabama, Penn State, USC, Miami. It's a pretty solid list there, Brandon.
Todd Bates may know what he's doing.
It would seem that Todd Bates knows a thing or two about evaluation of football players, because they were on this kid before any of the other big-time schools were. And it has now paid dividends in the form of a
Yep.
commitment from Floyd Boucard. And it was an arduous process to get to this point. Oh, you had to withstand a run from USC. The constant threat that Miami presented was always looming. Auburn began to get involved. Alabama and Georgia, the two titans of the SEC, both offered. This was a battle that Oklahoma had to win the hard way, Brandon, and they had to win it with one visit. Floyd
Yeah.
Boucard's only been to Oklahoma once. And in that sense, it's
Interesting.
actually really reminiscent of the Trent Wilson recruitment because Trent Wilson showed up to Oklahoma once and said, "Yep, I want to be there." Same thing with Floyd Boucard, man. And
Didn't you'll know this more than me with Trent Wilson? Well, and maybe I'm just misremembering this incorrectly.
Babbel is a proud sponsor of OU Insider and the Under the Visor podcast. The best way to learn a language is immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Look, if you're like me, you probably took a few years of Spanish or some other foreign language growing up, and everything went in one ear and out the other. You didn't really learn anything applicable to everyday life. But Babbel's convenient courses have helped me learn real-life conversation skills in a different language. It's so easy to learn how to order food, ask for directions, speak to merchants, etc., without having to consult language apps while on vacation. Now, here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/OU Insider. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/OU Insider, spelled BABBEL.com/OU Insider. Rules and restrictions may apply.
But wasn't it like we felt like Trent Wilson was going to commit on his visit because he was so in love with Todd Bates before he showed up? Wasn't that kind of the consensus? It was starting to trend that direction.
no, I don't think we thought he was going to commit on
So
his visit. Thought his visit was going to give Oklahoma a chance to establish themselves as a contender, get a return visit come OV season. The Trent Wilson recruitment moved a lot faster than we anticipated, which was
yeah.
obviously a good thing for Todd Bates in Oklahoma because all it took was that one visit, and the following month he was locked in.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I thought I was not remembering it correctly, and I wasn't. They all get mushed together. So yeah, I would love to see our takes on that. Were we in that thread saying this guy's going to blow up in the rankings?
Let me find
Because I'm
the
pretty
first.
positive that was our stance from like the very start.
Yeah, I don't. Here's my first comment on Boucard in response to a member that was trying to diminish his talent level. I said, I don't make a habit of calling every kid elite, even if they do have FBS potential. But Boucard's film is really impressive.
Yeah.
And then we had a few members that followed up. A few of our more calculated members that followed up and said, "Yeah, if you watched his film, this kid is actually really, really good. No, he's way ahead of the curve here."
The crazy part is, and it's because he moved around so much, right? That he was very hard to get a real good grasp on. If he had played 2 seasons at Miami Central, this dude is probably a top 100 kid in the country. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Gosh, I'm still reading through this thread. Later on down the line,
Ugh.
somebody goes, a 5.6 3-star is elite now. Lols.
I wish we could put the link in the like right below here so people could go look.
Gosh,
You just
it's
have
so
to sign
much fun.
up if you're
Todd
not a
Bates is
member.
actually a good evaluator of talent, Brandon. Imagine that.
But yeah, he's very, very good. I have to. You look at what Oklahoma's done, right, at defensive tackle. 23 was okay. Let's go back to 22. Todd Bates first gets hired. They're trying to close out that 2022 class. And the funny part is that there was a player that was going to Oregon. He's now at Oklahoma. He's actually a pretty decent defensive tackle for the University of Oklahoma. Has made some pretty big plays for OU during his tenure at the University of Oklahoma. He was a 4-star. He was a player that a lot of people definitely wasn't on Oklahoma's radar or the Oklahoma fans' radar. Because I remember I was on Chris. I was at my family's ranch out in can't remember what county it is. It's so just to digress a little bit, the ranch that we have, oh my gosh, the not Gotti, but what's the name of old school gangster?
Old school gangster.
Yeah,
Al Capone.
Thank you, Al Capone.
Oh, there we
So
go.
Al
First guess was
Capone,
correct.
yes, Al Capone. There's a cave on our family's ranch that he used to stay in. It's got his old bed, his refrigerator, electricity was like lined up in it. We go out there and we show people it all the time. It's crazy. Like literally, he had like and like the people in that county just let him be. And like the officers and everybody, he had everybody paid off and all that. It's wild. But he lived out there to stay away from the feds. And obviously my family didn't own that ranch at the time or that land, but so we were out there and I remember we got a call. We were with the previous uh what would I call it? Previous service we were working with. Network. And I remember the West Coast guy calling me and saying, "Hey, there's this guy that's really, really good that's been committed to Oregon that's going to OV to Oklahoma right after Christmas break. And there's a really good chance Oklahoma flips this kid. Like he loves Todd Bates, Grayson Holt." And that dude has now become a really good player.
As I recall it, though, that was Miguel Chavis that was running point on the recruitment.
Are you sure?
Yes, I am.
Again, I'm misremembering it then. Okay.
Yeah, because he had Halton, R. Mason Thomas, and then Cavante Henry.
That's right. That's right. But okay. The rumors were Todd Bates was going. He loves Todd Bates. The rumors were he was going to Oklahoma at that time because he hadn't left Clemson. But there was a ton of rumors at that. Remember, because people were like trying to downplay that he's not going to leave, blah, blah. And then.
Yeah, he didn't make the move until mid-January, I think.
He didn't because that's right. He didn't because he was supposed to get the DC job or at least, and they gave him the assistant head coaching job and he left Clemson. Anyways, because he wanted to have the DC title next to his name and OU provided that to him. He's now co-DC at OU. Plus he was really tight with Brent Venables. That also helped. Anyways, I digress. But that was the first big get, and you got to give Chavis credit on that. But that was the first big get as far as D-line goes. And that's kind of where you got the sense that things were going to change. Cavante Henry was an interesting one because he was committed, to Michigan, right? But he had great issues.
He was committed to Michigan. He wasn't going to make it in at Michigan.
Yeah.
And it was,
correct.
And I remember the colleague you're referring to, Greg Biggins, does a tremendous job out there covering the West Coast. And I was at the time I was yet to graduate with my master's degree. I remember I was sitting in my NCAA compliance class at the time. It was my final semester of grad school. I'm sitting in my NCAA compliance class with Toby Baldwin.
Yep.
And I'm texting back and forth on my laptop with Biggins about Cavante Henry because it was the day before signing day and nobody knew whether it was going to be Arizona or Oklahoma for him. That one went all the way down to the wire. And I was touching base with people on the Oklahoma end, found out, Oklahoma sent him his papers. Probably means they think he's signing. Ran that by Biggins. He said, yep. Sounds like it's going to be Oklahoma over here. And that was maybe the latest pleasant surprise of the 2022 class for Oklahoma, the one that came together literally at the 11th hour. But that was a great signing day for Oklahoma because
it was a lot.
I don't think Halton officially flipped until that signing day. Or Mason Thomas flipped on that signing day.
Yep.
Obviously, so did Henry, and then Jamarian Burt as well signed with Oklahoma that day.
That's right. Jamarian Burt, man. Obviously
that experiment did not last long. He's at South Alabama.
No, but he was very talented. You watch his film and everyone's like, dude, he could be a 4-star, but that my point to all of that was the class and the staff that was brought in started doing exactly what everybody thought they were going to do right from the start. You roll over to 2023 on the defensive line side, and yes, the edge and Chavis just killed it with the edge rushers. 23 and 24, it was just dynamite, right? With Adebawara and Okoye and and he got R. Mason Thomas in 2022. I mean, that was just freaking huge. And that was awesome. But I just remember everybody being psyched about it. And then when the addition of Todd Bates came to really fruition, it stopped being a rumor and became a thing. I just you thought it was gonna just take off running, and then 23 happened. Obviously, DJ Hicks happened. It happens late hour. Hicks was committed to Oklahoma for 4 months. 4 months, Parker. Literally, like that's the crazy part about it.
Enjoying this episode of the Under the Visor podcast? There's plenty more exclusive content, including team and recruiting intel from the market's top insiders, when you become a subscriber. Head to OUinsider.com to get started today and join the vibrant online community of Sooner fans on the Rivals Network. It'll only cost you a few bucks a month, and take my word for it, we'll make it worth your while.
When he announces his decision, literally 15, 20 minutes prior, he decides he's going to Texas A&M. That's what happens sometimes when NIL is involved. The story goes he called Todd Bates out of a defensive line meeting. And from what I'm told, talking to sources at that point, they kind of knew it wasn't good because why would he be calling right before he went on air, right? And that the rest is history. But later on, Todd Bates was so good at his job. His whole family wanted him at A&M, except for his grandparents. He wanted to go. They wanted him at Oklahoma. He still got an OV out of Hicks and almost flipped him because if people remember,
Almost flipped him, yeah.
Hicks didn't sign until the 11th hour on the third day, the last day that you can sign, because he had left to go places and was trying to talk his parents into Oklahoma. And they finally met up again. We can say all this now. Met up again, and the rest is history. And he ended up signing with A&M. But my point is that everything was kind of hit or miss, right, to start. And people were down on Todd Bates. Then 24 happened. And did 24 happen? It started out with Dejon Terry, a surprise transfer, right? Going into the 2023 season.
Yep.
In the off season. And then from that point on, Todd Bates just hit the ground running. Jaden Jackson, David Stone, right? Like just phenomenal. And I think Champ Sanders is kind of an underrated get for Oklahoma, depth wise, right? I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar, but I think he's going to be a good depth piece for Oklahoma. This Floyd Boucard kid, I think you add all of that. You add that to the Dominic Williams, right? If Dominic Williams decides to come back, right, for his senior season, this defensive front turns into a really it may be young, but it's going to be formidable. It's going to be there's no denying talent.
And I will say it's probably not going to be immediate, but Floyd Boucard does have superstar potential because
correct.
He is going to be one big dude at the collegiate level. He's already 6'3", 305 and carries that weight very well. There's still room to pack more muscle mass on there. And so you get him in a collegiate S&C program. I mean, I think about Dom Williams, who's 6'1", 6'2", 320 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
If Floyd Boucard is 320, 325 by his sophomore or junior year, and the technique is still there, the athleticism is still there, assuming he has developed commensurate with what we would expect a player like that to develop like under the tutelage of Todd Bates, he's going to be a really, really valuable piece for Oklahoma in the SEC. And he's just going to take up space. He'll be able to get after the passer. But man, if you if you want an idea of who the next Dominic Williams might be, once Dominic
Ooh.
Williams' time has come and gone at Oklahoma, Floyd Boucard has a lot of those same traits.
Ooh.
I feel okay making that comparison.
Ooh.
Like, I mean, to be
You
fair,
just compared him to a freshman All-American and a two-time first-team All-Big 12 defensive tackle. That's impressive.
at TCU.
Talent's talent, bro.
No, I hear you. And I think Dominic Williams is going to be really good, but I think Floyd Boucard is going to be really good too.
Woo. Boy, I'm telling you.
Yeah. Now, what does that look like in the SEC? You know, it's probably there's going to be some nuance there as far as the comparison goes, because Floyd Boucard could be a first team all Big 12 type of dude, but that's only good for honorable mention in the SEC, you know, so who knows?
No,
But
that may be or third team. Yeah, second, third team. But okay, so just to piggyback off that, I want to talk Boucard more, but I think this is a good topic. What's your expectation for Dominic Williams now? Like, because you brought that up, like, I remember Dusty thinks Dominic Williams is going to be dominant.
yeah.
Like, he thinks he's going to be like maybe all SEC dominant.
Well, my expectation is that we're going to be able to watch football games on Saturday and continually point out that, boy, Dominic Williams is wrecking shop down there on the interior. Now, what does that look like statistics-wise, production-wise? I don't know. It's really hard to measure that with a
tackle. You
tackle.
don't, yeah.
But my expectation will be that every single Saturday, we're going to be able to kind of hone in on the interior line play and notice snap after snap that Dominic Williams is moving bodies down there.
I agree. It feels like if I was going to make a bold statement or a prediction on Dominic Williams, I would tell you that I think he's going to end up being second or third team All SEC when it's all said and done.
Yeah. Well,
does that warrant going to the draft, though? I think that's the question, because
sure,
I just don't know in the world of college football anymore. I think with what he's making at Oklahoma, NIL wise, I think he would have to be a second rounder for him to want to just up and leave, which kind of throws out there kind of some money things, but
yes,
he's making a pretty penny. It's not seven figures. People sit there and think it's $1 million, but it's not $1 million. But kind of in the world of, similarly to Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman, right? Like they got third round grades and they came back because they got paid a good NIL to come back. I think where Dominic Williams sits, I think he would have. Do you not agree with that? Like,
I think frankly,
second round.
I think frankly, if you're an OU football fan, you want Dominic Williams to leave for the draft at the end of the year, because the only way he's leaving for the draft at the end of the year is if he had a very productive, very impactful 2024 season for Oklahoma.
That's true.
If he's coming back, it means he left some meat on the bone. He left some things on the table, which is fine. Like, you'll be glad to welcome that guy back for another season in Crimson and Cream. But best case scenario, he does go and dominate this fall. And then he's off to the NFL draft because Oklahoma went and won 10 games, made the college football playoff, due in no small part to his contributions on defense. So I don't think it's the worst thing if Dominic Williams declares for the NFL draft in December, because that means he had a very strong 2024 campaign, and that'll be a great thing for Oklahoma.
And the fact that you're saying that, and I agree with you on that, shows you exactly where that room is at. Because normally you're like, man, you want him to have a good year, but you don't want to have a great year, so he comes back. Like, you just
be like,
worried about what follows behind. Now you're not worried because you got David Stone, Jaden Jackson, and Floyd Boucard, Trent Wilson. Like, there's nothing to really worry about anymore. And Kamari Moore, like, and I know I'm probably missing names out of Grayson Halton. Like, I just named 6 dudes that were some of the best defensive tackles in their class coming out of high school. Just like that.
Yeah.
It's been forever. And I harken back to, like, last year. What is different if Oklahoma had Jalen Redmond last year and he didn't make that decision to go get cut by the Panthers? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
he had potential to be a top probably 3 to 5 round pick if he would have stayed, but decisions were made. Again, but that shows you the difference in where Oklahoma's at from the defensive tackles perspective, because Jalen Redmond did leave and they still were really good at defensive tackle last year. It's crazy. It's so different. And props to Todd Bates. You got to give it to Thibodeau for leaving them some meat on the table, but they didn't leave a lot, but he left some. He left enough that Todd Bates could kind of piece together a really formidable defensive tackle unit.
Yeah.
But regarding Floyd Boucard, I think he's going to end up between 200 and 250 when it's all said. No, wait. 175 and 220 is probably where I'd put him. Like that, is probably where I think he ends up with us at Rivals when it's all said and done. Is that where do you have him ending up? Do you think he cracks that top 50, 250? Because I do.
I do think he cracks the top 250. And I think a lot for him is going to be contingent upon what he does at a postseason showcase if he gets invited to one, like the Under Armour All-America game or the All-American Bowl. Like if he goes and has a strong performance there, he could be a guy kind of like a BJ Brooks, who was kind of not necessarily under the radar because he had the high major offers, but not considered truly elite until he goes and proves it against guys that the rest of the country does consider truly elite.
And he ended up being top 75, I think, when it was all said and done, something like that. Like that guy's that's a great, that was a really good comparison, Parker.
Thank you.
That he is the BJ Brooks of this class. That is a really good comparison. So, OU fans, if you look at that, and I know you see 3-star elsewhere, BJ Brooks was viewed very similarly across the board. Not so much 3-star, but he was viewed as outside the top 250, like 400 type. There were even some people, even at the end after he did what he did, that still were holding pat that he wasn't going to be in the top 300 of their because they just didn't understand evals.
It became undeniable because I showed up to Orlando for the week of the Under Armour All-American game, not expecting that BJ Brooks was going to be the toast of the town. Like there were, 6 or 7 OU guys out there. I didn't figure that BJ Brooks was going to be easily the most impressive, but again, it was undeniable. If you watched the offensive line, defensive line one-on-ones, you watched them in any setting throughout the week, it became very clear, okay, this kid is unbreakable. You cannot get through him. You can't move him. You can't get past him. And I think there were a lot of folks out there, including myself, that had modest expectations for BJ Brooks because, I mean, I'll be straight with you, Brandon. That he used to be a fat boy. He was a straight up fat kid when he was a sophomore. I think he was like 390 pounds as a sophomore in high school. So,
I believe somebody told me he was 410.
Goodness gracious. Yeah, so there you go.
I don't know if that's true, but yeah.
To have transformed his body the way that he did over his final year and a half of high school to get to the point where he could go to Orlando and dominate the way that he did. It's a testament to his work ethic, and you tip your cap to him. But again, I think there were a lot of folks out there that still saw BJ Brooks as the 390-pound fat kid that was still coming down from that ballooning weight and would need a while to get to the point where he was going to be quick enough on his feet and motile enough to be able to hold up against elite defensive linemen.
Well, if I remember correctly, I think he and David Stone really put on a show during the practice sessions during one-on-one. And that's kind of where there was a thought that you and I and several other people thought that David Stone was going to move up and be kind of in the top 5 when it was all said and done. But I will say this about our industry, and people can be mad in our industry for saying this. We are a stubborn bunch as well. Very stubborn. we are not going to say that we were wrong about somebody until they prove it in college. Like, there were still a lot of several detractors with David Stone, even after his performance at the Under Armour, even after everything that he did at IMG. The reason why he went to IMG is because people thought, and I remember he called me like Parker. He called me like you know this, like 3 times, asked me about whether he should go to IMG Academy or not, and I told him, one, I can't make that decision for you, right? That's a parent decision, because he wanted my advice on what I thought he thought rankings was going to do. But he told me this, and I'll never forget. He told me this. He said, if I want to get to be the number one player in the class, I need to go to IMG. And he might have been right, because the last guy that was number one, I believe, out of the state of Oklahoma ended up being an all-star baseball player, Matt Holliday. He was an amazing quarterback at Stillwater. He was the number one player in the country during his dude, I was like 13, 14 years old when that happened. That's how long ago this was. So it just kind of, David Stone was right. Like, IMG was probably the best thing he ever did. And it stuck for OK Preps, but he still had detractors, even though everything that he did at Del City, IMG, Under Armour game, he was the MVP of the freaking Polynesian Bowl, Parker. And he still didn't move up very much, because we're a stubborn bunch. We are stubborn. We are a stubborn bunch of people. We think we know what we know, and we've evaled the way we've evaled. We're gonna stay pat with it, and we're not gonna move until they prove us. And then we're gonna go rewrite. We're gonna write a re-ranking after their first 2 years of college, right? Like, that's a clickbaity thing, but that's what we do in our industry. And I know that sounds really bad, but it's the truth. We're stubborn. Like, do you not think David Stone was the best D tackle in the class last year after all the performances he put up?
No, I do. I do think he was pretty clearly the best defensive tackle in the class.
But he wasn't ranked that way. So, I mean, it is what it is.
Well, he was. He was the number one defensive tackle in the class.
Are you sure? I thought he was number 2.
No, he was number 1.
Okay, now I got to go look this up, because I remember
he may also have been the number 1 true defender in the country. I think the only guy that outranked him, to my recollection, in the final rankings was Mike Matthews, who was an athlete.
He was 17th overall composite. He was a number 2 D tackle.
Oh, composite. Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's what I was going on. I know rivals he was. Yeah, I know I know where we had him ranked. I was talking about industry as a whole. Yeah, he was 4th ranked D tackle on 24/7. Composite was number 2. He was number 1 with us. Correct.
Regardless,
yeah.
Kind of along those same lines, as we kind of pivot here to the SEC preseason poll, in which we all voted.
Yeah.
How is, I shouldn't say how is, that makes it sound like it is definitively a thing that is happening. I feel as though, I feel as though the rest of the SEC and the rest of the country is sleeping heavily on Nick Anderson. True, false, thoughts?
I'm having to word this because I almost said something.
Okay, like, because to me, when I was
no, it's just because of what I've witnessed, right? Like,
oh yeah, but I mean, like, they've all witnessed it too. The guy caught 10 touchdowns last year.
Correct. I was just talking about off-season stuff. I'll say so. This isn't like a brag or anything. I want to just disclaim that out there. So my son and Jackson, they trained together during the off season some, and Nick Anderson was one of the guys that was running routes for Jackson Arnold during that training session. He looks about as good as you could possibly look as a wide receiver. Like, yeah, well, and
he's got first round makeup, man.
He is, Parker. He is serious as all get out. Like, that dude, he made some jokes here and there, but like he was very this the whole time. They were obviously there was like 6 or 7 guys that had met up to run routes for the quarterbacks and particularly Jackson, right? Um, and man, he was serious as can be and very focused, very driven. I did talk to him a bit about his Rodney. I always was I've always been intrigued with Rodney Anderson. He's one of my favorite OU players of all time. And he essentially said that he got his work ethic from Rodney and his focus. He learned that from Rodney. And I thought that was interesting. But he looks faster. He looks bigger. He looks stronger. And obviously, after getting a full year of not being injured, I think that was the key, Parker. He was healthy. Hamstrings have been his issue, right? Since he's been at Oklahoma. He's going to be a player this year in the SEC that everybody's going to be talking about. And I think by week 5, he's a household name in the SEC after they play Auburn and Tennessee. I'm not saying OU beats Auburn or Tennessee. I'm saying that he makes some plays that turns everybody's heads.
Well, because to me, when I was filling out the ballot, it's very obvious who your first selection at wide receiver is, right? It's Luther Burden. Find me anyone who would debate that point. No, Luther Burden is very obviously the guy that should be selected first on everyone's ballot at wide receiver. That goes without saying. Beyond that, I was like, I don't know if there's a wide receiver on this list that I like better than Nick Anderson. I don't know if there's a wide receiver on this list that I think higher of than Nick Anderson.
We've seen him more than everybody else. So
Which is true.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that does, like, I will acknowledge.
It does.
I think everybody should acknowledge when you're unsure, when you're waffling, you're probably going to give the benefit of the doubt to the guy that you've seen the most. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's Nick Anderson. For somebody that covers LSU, that's probably Kyron Lacey. So on and so forth. For somebody, you covered Texas, it's probably Isaiah Bond. But objectively, what Nick Anderson accomplished in 2023 should have had him, to me, again, maybe I shouldn't say objectively. I felt that Nick Anderson, what he accomplished in 2023, should have had him on at least the third team All SEC ballot.
Without question. By the way, the first team guys, you want to know what they both have in common? They both either been committed or silently committed to Oklahoma at one point in time.
Who's the other besides
Trey
Luther?
Harris? Trey Harris.
Oh, Trey Harris. That's right.
Yep. Because remember, he was supposed to announce, and then he made that surprise visit to Ole Miss and flipped. And we had everything written, waiting, and then we get a call like he's going to take a visit to Ole Miss before he announces. We're all like, yeah,
bye.
Yep, bye bye. So that very interesting. By the way, yeah, Isaiah Bond I thought was an interesting pick for second team. I'm just going to say it, and it has nothing to do with him playing in Texas.
No, and I agree. I think the love for Isaiah Bond is probably a little bit overstated based on his production to this point in college. Now,
Missouri love it, right? Like love it being that like of all
Dominic
like
Lovett.
They could have had first and third team if he would have stuck, but Theo Weiss moved him out.
Yeah. And look, like I always have Missouri fans in my mentions, always. But I tweeted out that I had OU fourth in my preseason SEC poll, and I had 4 Sooners on the All SEC first team. And I had Missouri fans all up in my mentions about this guy's a homer, whatever. It's the thing that they do. But what I can do is I can defend all of those selections, right? So I'm not just going down the list and saying, "Oh, that guy plays for OU." Boom, throwing him on the ballot. No, um, I can sit here and tell you, everybody, or I would say most agree, Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman are all SEC first team dudes, as
Without question.
indicated by the
Yes.
fact that they were on the first team.
Yep.
I can very easily defend the selection of Nick Anderson coming off of his 10 touchdown campaign. And again, just given his skill set, the first round makeup, 6'4", 220, moving like that, you don't see many wide receivers in the country that have those skills and that size and everything that he brings to the table. And I think the one that was probably the biggest flyer or outlier, if you will, was Gavin Sawchuk. I had him on my first team All SEC ballot. And admittedly, that one's a little bit more speculative than the rest. But I don't think you can talk me into a guy that had 5 straight 100-yard campaigns to close out the 2023 season when he finally got fully healthy. I don't think you can talk me into picking that guy for first team All SEC to be an outlandishly wrong or poor pick. If you disagree with it, then fine. But again, I have my reasons for believing that Gavin Sawchuk is going to have a big 2024. And again, we saw it last year when he finally got healthy.
Yeah, Nick Anderson is, he's going to be a superstar. I think another player that I think is going to end up being all SEC when it's all said and done. I think this is going to show. I think Jacob Sexton's going to be all SEC when it's all said and done. I don't know whether it's going to be first, second, or third team, but I think
I think I may have had him on the third team. I can't recall. There's some really good offensive linemen in the SEC.
There's
really good offensive linemen.
Yeah. Trenches. I think that's the one thing when I was doing it, I noticed how much different. Like you could just, when you were doing the Big 12 ballots, you could always sit there and go, you could just make it all OU or Texas and have both of their teams just lace the whole conference, all whatever teams, right? But it is crazy down to South Carolina to like just they've got good players. And you're like, that guy's really good. I remember him. That guy's really good. Oh, that guy could be here. Like there are arguments to be made at almost every position. I think Arkansas and Vanderbilt, notwithstanding, are teams that
I don't think I had a single Vanderbilt player on my ballot. And I think the only Arkansas player I had was Jalen Braxton. Oh, no, wait. Luke Has. I forgot about Luke Has.
I was like, whoa,
Luke Has was my first team All SEC tight end pick.
That's a good pick. He's freaking amazing. Yes, great pick. I think I had him first or second team as well. So, again, like outside of those two programs, you could probably have 3 or 4 on every team if you wanted to on any which first, second, or third team. I think that was the difference that I've seen. And that's where they say it means more. Like it definitely means more when I'm looking at the rosters. It's way different. You can see why the NFL goes, all right, we're going to start over here in the SEC, and then we're going to work our way over to the other conferences because that's probably where we're going to get the majority of our draft picks. Makes sense after you look at what we got to look at and get pick the ballots. So it was crazy. Maybe I'm another guy that I think will have a say. And people are going to think it's going to be Woody Washington when I say this on the defensive side of the ball. Everybody's going to go, oh, it's Woody Washington. No, it's not. If this guy stays healthy, this dude will be, I'm making a prediction right now, first or second or third team All SEC at corner.
I know where you're going with this.
Gentry Williams.
Yeah.
Do you remember how good he was before, like the first 8 games of the year before his shoulder got screwed up? Was he not leading the nation in picks for a while? Was that not a true? Am I
He may have
remembering that
been
wrong?
briefly.
I think he was like the first 3 weeks. He had like 3 or 4 picks, right? Like
had
the
one
first.
in the Texas game.
Yep. Well, I think it may have been like the first 7 weeks. He was like up there. Like I think he had like 3 or 4 picks. How many did he end up last year? 4, right?
I think he had 4. Billy Bowman led the team with 6.
Yeah. So, but he got hurt. He had 4 going into like week 7 or week 8, which was like I think the most. And then obviously he fell off because he had one arm. But he, when healthy, everybody, even when we talked to like this offseason, he came back like a month ago. Now he was fully cleared like a month ago. I think it was the second week of June. And from what I've been told is he's hit the ground running. He's bigger. They say he's just as fast, but like you can tell like he's put on weight. I think he's 12 pounds heavier than he was last year. He played at I think it was like 169 last year, 171, something like that was like his actual weight. He's almost a 190 right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
So I mean, like that tells you the stark difference in where he's at. So those two, just off the top of my head, would be guys that I look at, and then obviously Gavin Sawchuk. I think I if the offensive line does what they're supposed to do, he should have a huge year. He is so talented. So talented. I mean, everybody saw the last 6 weeks of the season. That dude almost had 800 yards in 6 weeks. That's impressive. And we're not even talking about Branson Hickman, a dude that's had 1 sack given up in his career. 1 sack, Parker.
Yeah. And man, I had a hard time. I thought about you only get 2 slots for center on your ballot. So I thought long and hard about giving Branson Hickman the nod. Had to go with Parker Brailsford from Alabama, Cooper Mays from Tennessee. Those guys to me felt pretty undeniable. But Branson Hickman will have a chance to put himself in that conversation. He's north of 300 pounds on the latest roster update. So fully expect that he's going to be able to hold his own in the trenches, and the value that he'll provide just from a cognitive standpoint, knowing everything that's going on at center, being able to call the shots the way you need a center to do. Again, I mean, we talked about it when he committed, but I think that's a very, very underrated addition for Oklahoma. He's not the first guy that you're going to take note of on any given Saturday this fall. But when you really dig into what's really making an impact in the football game, I think you'll keep coming back to what Branson Hickman's doing at center.
Was it last year that Oklahoma struggled to get sacks there for a bit? It wasn't they? Like went through,
because they were facing 6 and 7 man protections on every snap.
They were, but I want to harken back to that SMU game, which Branson Hickman was a center, right?
Yeah.
They did a phenomenal. He obviously was calling the protections, right? And calling the slides and everything that they're supposed to do with the offensive line. What he did against Oklahoma was super impressive. I think that's what, now that I look back at it, it makes sense why Oklahoma struggled to get to Stone. Preston Stone seemed like he had all day because, yes, I get they were max protecting, but at the same time, you have to give it up to Branson Hickman and the protections that he called in the slides, right? Like I thought, to me, that says everything you need to know about what Oklahoma's getting in him. But you brought up Mays. He walked in with a cowboy hat, man. He had the cowboy boots on with his suit and stuff like that. Between him and Billy Bowman, they both look like 2 badasses walking around with the cowboy hats. Like you knew they were ballers because they were walking around like that. I thought he looked the part, every bit of it. And remember, Oklahoma was in on him for quite a while during his recruitment. That may have been before your time, though.
I think it was. That would have been what, class of 20?
Yeah, it was right when you started. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that would have been. My first real class was Caleb Williams' class.
Yep, 21. Very nice. All right. Let's go through how we ranked the SEC. I'll let you go first.
Okay.
1 through 16. Did you throw yours out there on Twitter already?
Yeah, I mean, look,
I didn't.
once you get down to the bottom half, it doesn't really matter. Like you just kind of got to fill it in as it makes. Like I think once I got past 8, it's like shoot, any of these
Who was
teams
your
could
8?
be my 8th team. Here, I have my ballot right in front of me. Actually,
I do too.
my number 8 team was LSU.
That was mine. Who was your 7?
Texas A&M.
Okay, I had Texas A&M at 9.
Okay, we might have flip-flopped A&M
Sorry,
and
Aggies.
Missouri. Did you have Missouri at 7?
I had Tennessee at 7. I had Missouri at 6.
Okay.
I had Oklahoma 5. You had
Yeah, so
Oklahoma 4.
so I had Oklahoma 4. Um, the only teams that I had ahead of them were Georgia, Ole Miss, and Alabama. As I mentioned on Twitter, I gave OU the edge at 4 over Tennessee and Texas because I think
Where
they win those head-to-heads.
where'd you have Texas?
6. I'm at
Ooh,
6.
I had 3. I had them at 3.
Yeah,
And not because I think they're that good. Their schedule is just like Charmin
no, it's
soft.
an easy schedule, no doubt about it. But I think, and we had this conversation with SEC Mike a couple of times. He sees a lot of the same things I see. I don't trust Texas. Not saying they
No,
can't be
agree.
good or that they won't be good. I just don't really trust them with all that they have to
Mm.
replace. And so I wasn't comfortable putting them much higher. There are those that were, and that's fine. I just don't really trust them right now. So that was my the meaningful portion of my ballot. Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, OU, Tennessee, Texas. That was my top 6.
So we both agree it's Georgia, Ole Miss in the SEC title game this year.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
weird to
that'll be
say.
interesting.
Ole Miss. I can't remember the last
I
time.
I debated flip-flopping Ole Miss and Alabama too, because I do think Alabama is going to be squarely in that conversation.
Agreed. I have them at 4. I think the first 6 teams are in kind of contention to play Georgia, right? Or the first
Yeah.
2 through 6, I think is how I have it, because I have Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, Missouri 1 through 6, and I think 2 through 6 you could probably interchange depending on how you see it. Now, obviously, Oklahoma's schedule is what makes us picking them 4 and 5, you 4, me 5, because that schedule is brutal. But outside of LSU and Ole Miss and Auburn, I think they win that Auburn game. I do. I think they win that Auburn game.
That Auburn game might be tricky because they're going to be 4-0. They're going to be 4-0 when Oklahoma comes
Yep.
to town. You look at that schedule, Auburn won't lose any of those 4 games. So Oklahoma will have to go to Jordan-Hare Stadium to play a 4-0 Auburn team, and that could get spooky.
And probably at night too, unfortunately. So that's going to be scary. All right. We've covered everything that we need to cover on this podcast. I think we'll save some meat for our next podcast when we'll talk a lot more about what's going on, our picks, our bowl predictions. I think we're getting close because July 29th is first practice, Parker. July 29th is first OU practice. It's coming around the corner, man. It's literally 9 days away. Football season is squarely staring us right in the eye. And so we'll I think next week podcast we can discuss bowl predictions and where we have OU record wise. I think finally put it out there. We've been holding off on that for as we get closer to the season. So let's do that. But if you're not a member of OU Insider, go right now. $9.95 a month. $9.95 will get you a membership. Big news coming up. Obviously, the announcement of Floyd Boucard. He's committed to Oklahoma now. And now next up, you've got Michael Fasusi, 5-star offensive lineman, announcing next month. You've got Andrew Babalola, 5-star offensive lineman, announcing next month. You've got Cade Petchak, 3-star defensive end, and you've got 4-star linebacker Christian Jones, all set to announce over the next month or so. You got to be on OU Insider if you want to know what's going to happen. We'll be following that closely. We'll have updates as they get closer. A lot, 26, 27, 28, all those guys coming sooner than the Stars this next weekend. The Party of the Palace for the 25 class is also this next weekend. All that's happening. We'll have that covered for you. We'll have the list. We'll have everything on OU Insider VIP. Plus, we'll have all the coverage for OU football fall camp. Everything will be right there at OU Insider VIP, $9.95 a month, $99.95, and you'll get a whole season if you sign up for a year, you get the whole season all the way up to now in 2025. So make sure you do that. We'd love to see you on there. Join the thousands of OU fans that are already on OU Insider VIP. Also, subscribe to this channel. Constant updates, constant podcasts, everything right here, right now. The more you subscribe here, the more content we will provide for you guys each and every day like we always do. All right. For Parker Thune, my name is Brandon Drum. You guys have a blessed day.